All right, today we're going to break down a deal that on the surface looks like a pretty straightforward mining acquisition. But trust me, underneath, it's a geopolitical chess move of the highest order, one that could seriously reshape global supply chains for everything from your phone to next-gen nuclear reactors.
$340 million. That's the number that set off all the alarm bells. Back in November 2024, a Chinese state-owned company called China Nonferrous Trade dropped this massive sum on a mine deep in the Brazilian Amazon. It's a huge price tag. So what exactly were they buying? Because officially, this was a deal for Mineração Taboca and its Pitinga mine, which just happens to be the world's largest tin resource. But as you're about to see, this deal was never really about tin. China paid a skyscraper price for a very specific reason, and it wasn't for soldering material.
So let's break down the official transaction. China Nonferrous Trade bought the whole Pitinga mine operation. It's located up in Presidente Figueiredo, about 300 kilometers north of Manaus. And look, they weren't just buying a hole in the ground. They were buying a strategic presence for the next century.
And just look at the scale of what they got. Yeah, the world's biggest tin resource, sure, but also its own dedicated power plant, its own smelter to process the ore, and a 100-year operational lifespan. I mean, even if you ignore the hidden prize, this is a massive, self-contained, strategic asset.
And that really gets to the heart of this entire explainer. The geology of the Pitinga mine basically holds Brazil's entire strategic mineral future, a future that is now physically in the hands of Beijing. For $340 million, China literally bought a century-long physical presence on top of an incredible amount of dormant wealth.
And that leads us to the crucial question that really pivots this whole story. How on earth can buying a private tin mine put the nuclear future of an entire country at risk? Well, the answer is in this fascinating paradox between the law and the literal ground beneath their feet.
This brings us right to the core of the problem, what I'm calling Brazil's uranium paradox. It's this fundamental conflict between what the law says on paper and what's actually happening on the ground, in the Amazon. This right here is the heart of China's absolutely brilliant strategic move. You have to understand, Brazil's constitution is crystal clear on this. Uranium is a federal monopoly, period. The state company, INB, is the only one legally allowed to research, mine, or sell nuclear minerals. No private company, foreign or otherwise, is supposed to be able to touch it. And, the Brazilian government is standing by this. INB even put out a statement to clarify that legally, no uranium was sold. And look, they are technically correct, but this is exactly where the paradox kicks in.
Okay, so here's where the legal fiction smacks right into physical reality. Legally, uranium is a state monopoly, but physically, the Pitinga mine is sitting on top of an estimated 150,000 tons of uranium concentrate. To put that in perspective, that's double the known reserves of Brazil's main uranium mine. The catch is that it's technically classified as a tailings byproduct from the tin mining, and here's the kicker. INB, the state company, doesn't have the complex, expensive tech needed to separate it. So now, China physically controls the site, the ore, and all the waste it's mixed in with. And that, right there, is the masterstroke of this deal. By controlling the physical location and the proprietary technology to process the ore, China has created a technical dependency. That dependency gives them what is effectively a technical veto. If Brazil wants to access its own massive uranium deposit, it now has to go through the Chinese company that has physical control over it.
But believe it or not, the story doesn't stop with uranium. That might be the long-term prize, but the immediate impact on other critical supply chains is just as huge. So what else was tucked into this $340 million deal?
Yeah, because the uranium is the long game. The immediate win for Beijing is getting control over a whole treasure trove of minerals that are absolutely essential for the high-tech, defense, and aerospace industries of the 21st century. I mean, just take a look at this list. We are talking niobium for jet engines and rockets, tantalum for the capacitors inside every single laptop and smartphone, thorium for next-generation nuclear reactors. By buying this one mine, China has secured a massive upstream source for multiple, completely different critical mineral supply chains that the West absolutely depends on.
And the impact here is immediate. With the purchase of the Pitinga mine and its Pirapora smelter, a full third of Brazil's entire refined tin output is now under the control of a Chinese state-owned company. That gives Beijing significant new leverage in the global electronics market right now.
So a move this big, this strategic, it doesn't just happen in a vacuum, right? It was only made possible because of a much bigger, rapidly changing relationship between Brazil and China, all playing out against the backdrop of a new, great power competition for resources.
So let's zoom out for a second and look at the bigger picture. The Pitinga acquisition is a major move on a global chessboard. Brazil's huge, untapped mineral wealth is quickly becoming a new battleground for influence between the world's superpowers.
And this isn't just theoretical. You can see it playing out. On one side, you have China making these big top-down diplomatic plays, like signing a letter of intent for peaceful nuclear cooperation at the BRICS summit. And on the other side, you've got Russia making direct commercial moves, with its state-owned company Rosatom recently beating out a Chinese competitor to win a $40 million contract to enrich Brazilian uranium. Pitinga is just the latest, and maybe the most important move in this game.
So all of this really boils down to one critical question. When a foreign power effectively holds a veto over a key national resource, what are the real-world consequences? And for those of us watching from the outside, where are the risks and where are the opportunities?
Okay, let's distill this all down into a clear-eyed assessment. The Pitinga deal has created a totally new reality for anyone invested in these critical supply chains, or in Brazil's resource sector itself.
So I see three core risks here. First, there's a political backlash already building in Brazil. Senator Plinio Valerio is demanding legal action, which creates a ton of regulatory uncertainty. Second, you have a direct supply chain threat. Key minerals for Western defense and aerospace are now controlled by Beijing. And third, the biggest risk of all, that technical veto. Access to Brazil's largest dormant uranium deposit now depends entirely on China's willingness to cooperate.
But of course, where there's risk, there's often opportunity. Short-term, with a third of Brazil's tin now controlled by China, other local producers might get a second look as the market tries to diversify. Mid-term, companies that offer non-Chinese sources of niobium and tantalum just became a lot more strategically valuable. And long-term, this whole affair signals that the race is officially on for Brazil's other vast, untapped mineral resources.
I mean, let that sink in for a second. For the price of a single skyscraper in Manhattan, China didn't just buy a mine. They bought a century of strategic options, physical control over multiple critical supply chains, and a de facto veto on Brazil's entire nuclear future. The West seems to have slept right through it.
And that brings us to our final thought. As huge as this Pitinga deal is, it might just be the opening move. This chart shows just how much of Brazil's potential uranium wealth hasn't even been explored yet. With 74% of its subsoil completely unstudied, the strategic competition for Brazil's resources, well, it's really only just begun.